smell. That's the first thing your senses register when the massive hydraulic gears of Vault 95 finally groan into motion. It's not just the stale air of a forgotten tomb. It's a thick, cloying scent of oxidized copper, rotting synthetics, and absolute crystallized defeat. The Commonwealth is a graveyard of flash-frozen moments, lives ended in a heartbeat by nuclear fire. But here, the end arrived with agonizing slowness, muffled by the sound of soft jazz and the rustle of corporate brochures. Vault-Tec were the ultimate architects of the long con. They marketed this place as the clean slate, a grand sanctuary for those whose wills had been hollowed out by chems long before the horizon turned into an ocean of fire. They handpicked the most vulnerable. They didn't just promise a shield against radiation, they promised a victory over the self. For 5 years, this place was a monument to human endurance. 5 years of order, discipline, and a fragile, desperate hope. Looking at these terminals, it's easy to be fooled. Easy to believe that Vault-Tec actually understood the word mercy. But we aren't here to study utopia. We're here to dissect the hidden reserve protocol. Because Vault-Tec's true genius wasn't in healing, it was in calculating the exact price of a human soul. And as it turns out, that price was just one tiny, well-timed open door. Today, we descend into a hell that people built for themselves, using nothing but a gift from their corporate saviors. Welcome to Vault 95, the longest relapse in human history. A new day, a new you. This wasn't just a slogan for Vault 95. It was a psychological anchor designed to mask a massive structural deception. While the surface world was being erased by thermal fire, these residents lived in a controlled vacuum where the scent of fresh laundry and smooth jazz replaced the chaos of their past lives. It didn't look like a prison. It was a sterile sanctuary. Vault-Tec provided the perfect baseline. Pristine quarters, 3 balanced meals, and a total absence of illicit chemical stimulants. No buff out, no psycho, just absolute structure. In internal memos, this was labeled a social utopia, but the reality was far more clinical. Behind the communal gardens and the handshakes of recovery, the lenses were recording every heartbeat. The residents weren't being healed, they were being calibrated. Their 5 years of sobriety were nothing more than a baseline for the most aggressive stress test ever authorized by the system. The clean slate phase was nearing completion. Vault-Tec had finished observing the recovery, and they were finally ready to trigger the terminal phase of the experiment. 5 years of synthetic peace. That is more than enough time for a human subject to overwrite the memory of a chemical fault. When we analyze the archives of Vault 95, we find evidence of an unexpectedly high social cohesion baseline. The terminal entries suggest that hardened individuals have formed a stable, functional unit. They weren't just residents. They had become a synchronized brotherhood. They had survived a period of acute biochemical instability and emerged into a world of absolute discipline. To these people, Vault-Tec was the ultimate authority, the architect of their new existence. They repaid this perceived mercy with flawless operational compliance. Look at the artifacts left behind. Pre-war magazines, technical sketches, a tidy living space. This was the rarest resource in the Commonwealth, a stable human baseline. To an outside observer, it looked like a success story. But while the subjects were calculating their futures, a countdown was reaching its 0 hour behind the overseer's office. As the residents of 95 slept, the hidden reserve protocol was arming itself. The silence in the hallways was becoming pressurized. Behind the reinforced panels, mechanical servos were already groaning, beginning to unseal the caches containing the very substance that was supposed to stay buried for eternity. The 5-year anniversary. In the official logs of Vault 95, this date was marked as the terminal threshold. The residents were celebrating a victory over their own biological limitations. They didn't know that one of them, a trusted unit who had shared their rations and their secrets, was a Vault-Tec facilitator under deep cover. He wasn't there to assist in their recovery. He was there to monitor the countdown. When the internal clock struck 0, he didn't offer a toast. He activated the hidden mechanism. A soft electronic snap echoed from behind a maintenance hatch, the final mechanical chord of the clean slate phase. A hidden compartment concealed for half a decade slid open. It wasn't filled with armaments. It contained a massive reserve of pristine pre-war chemical assets, stacks of high-potency neurostimulants, a lifetime supply of the exact substances they had been conditioned to forget. This wasn't a gift. It was a catalyst for a systemic regress. Vault-Tec understood that human resolve is a fragile variable, one that can be reset to 0 with the correct chemical key. The facilitator stepped back into the shadows as the atmospheric filters began to circulate the scent of old habits. The social experiment had transitioned into its terminal phase. The celebration ended the moment the first resident looked into the dark and saw their own obsolescence waiting for them. Civilization is a fragile coating. In Vault 95, it took exactly 40 minutes for that coating to disintegrate. The silence that took 5 years to establish didn't just break it, underwent a violent decompression. We don't need to observe the active conflict to understand the scale of the failure. We only need to analyze the environmental wreckage. This is the structural record of a total systemic collapse. Look at the cafeteria. The space intended for community integration has been reclaimed by chaos. Overturned tables are no longer social hubs. They are tactical barricades. The terminal entries provide a frame-by-frame analysis of the cognitive decay. It begins with a justification, a single dose for stabilization. It escalates to extreme paranoia regarding asset security. And finally, it dissolves into complete informational static. When linguistic logic failed, the subjects turned to kinetic solutions to resolve their internal conflicts. Vault-Tec achieved their objective. From their reinforced observation decks, the observers recorded the data with clinical detachment. The subjects had entered the self-liquidation phase. The irony is purely mechanical. The gate was open, but every single resident initiated their own descent of their own volition. This facility is a monument to human fragility. Looking at these hollowed out sectors, you realize that the experiment proved a terminal point. Under the right chemical pressure, the drive for self-preservation is easily overwritten by a pre-war corporate logo. Today, the sectors of 95 are occupied by a new functional force. The Gunners, the Commonwealth's most efficient paramilitary outfit, have repurposed these structural ruins as a strategic asset. They are indifferent to the residual anomalies of the past. To them, Vault 95 is simply a fortified perimeter built on a foundation of collapsed social units. They have mounted automated turrets over the same barricades where the original residents experienced their final systemic shutdown. The Gunners are the logical conclusion of the experiment. They represent the world Vault-Tec anticipated, a reality where fragile trust is replaced by the kinetic logic of superior firepower. Deep within the encrypted server banks, the final clinical assessment remains. Subject 95, social neutralization efficiency, 100%. Conclusion, social structures are entirely liquidated within 120 minutes of chemical re-exposure. Data transmitted to central hub. Vault-Tec didn't build these enclosures to preserve the species. They built them to map the exact mechanics of our fragmentation. 95 was their operational masterpiece. The wasteland does not acknowledge errors, but it thrives on systemic irony. A facility designed for reconstruction became a laboratory for the erasure of the human cognitive profile. If you seek to bypass the encryption on the Commonwealth's other concrete containment units, your system identification is required. Subscribe to authorize access to the next audit. Because in the architecture of Vault-Tec, every door leads either to a controlled vacuum or to another hidden reserve. Stay vigilant. The next file is already loading.